Thanks, Cherise. And thanks for the uplifting worship music that you chose today. Huh? And how fitting were those worship songs this morning, singing, "Today is the day where we give up all our worries, our sorrows, our fears to God, and forever we're praising God for who He is, and that's why we're able to have no fear." And it's funny because, like Cherie says, we never talk beforehand what we're going to be talking about. And things that have led me to come with this message today were confirmed by what Mitra was talking about last week about Jonah and fear and second chances. We're doing engaged Bible studies, and some of the topics as well that were brought up was we're doing healthy habits, but one of the topics before was about fear. And even this morning, I'm listening to the Christian radio station, and the song came up was, I don't know what the title is, but the song, the main line of the chorus is, "Fear is not my, I forgot, I don't know the word, but fear is not my identity, but you are." Do you know that song? Okay. Don't know what the word is. But all of this to say, I think what God wants us to hear and talk about more is about fear. And I think fear is something that's underappreciated, because when you think about fear, you usually think of it as something that's bad and scary, but it depends on how you see it and what you do with it. And so as we read that first verse, there's nothing for us to fear. Why? Because God tells us, "For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not. I am the one who helps you." And how encouraging is that word to hear from the God Himself, who lets us call Him Father. So I have a question for you guys. What are you afraid of? If you want to share, you can, but you can just think of it in your head. What are you afraid of? Usually the common ones are things like you're afraid of thunder and lightning. You're afraid of the dark. You're afraid of not doing well in school or at work. Things that you're afraid of. There can be many things, or maybe there's one thing you can think about. But if I asked you the question, what is your biggest fear? I think that goes a lot deeper than something like loud noises, thunder and lightning, the dark. It's something bigger. It's deep inside of you. Some of the common fears for the biggest fear for people is the dark, or being alone, or silence, aging, death. But if you look at it, it's actually deeper than that. The fear of the dark is because what you're fearing is the unknown. You don't know what's going to pop out. That's why I don't like horror suspenseful movies. It's not really being alone or silence that you're afraid of. It's the fear that you're not heard, or the fear of, like, not the silence, but you can hear your own thoughts. Those things you don't want to listen to and you drown out have no distractions. So you're not scared of silence. You're scared of the things that are inside. Aging and death is not really aging and death, but a lot of it is the regret. What you fear is regret, that you didn't have enough time, that there are things that you could have said and done. Those are things where your biggest fears is more inside of you. So, aside from the grammar differences of what the difference between fear and afraid is. If you want to go technical, I guess, being afraid is an adjective. It's just a description. It's something temporary. I'm afraid of the dark. It's easy to find a solution to it. I'm afraid of the dark, so what do? Just turn on the lights. And it's something that's affected by external. That's something outside. So, again, I'm scared of the dark. Just turn on the lights. There's your solution. Or like I was saying, I'm afraid of thunder and lightning. Well, when the thunderstorm passes away, you're fine. You're comfortable again. It's just temporary. What some people do is they cover their ears so that they don't see or hear the thunder and lightning storms. Meanwhile, fear, it's a noun, it's a thing, but it's also an action. You're in the middle of being afraid. And like we were saying it earlier, fear is deeply ingrained. And because it is, you need to make a more conscious effort to snap out of it. And it's something that's affecting you internally. And usually that fear is because it has to do with ourself. And when it becomes something very extreme, detrimental, that's when it becomes a phobia. Because now it's affecting your everyday life. You can't function properly. And when you think of it, it's like there's a spectrum of what fear can do to you and how your relationship is with it. So fear is a noun, it's an unpleasant emotion, and a verb because you're being scared of something, you're apprehensive, you have dread. And being afraid is an adjective. You're just, in that state of being in relation to something. I am afraid of that darkness, of that lightning storm. So there's that question that I was asking. What are you afraid of? And what's your biggest fear? They probably are not the same thing. And that's something that really affects the way that we can see ourselves and interact with people and the way that we see God. So I just listed some common phobias that people have. Maybe you've heard of it or not. I'll just read them out and see if you guys know what it is. Aerophobia. Does anyone have an idea or a guess? Fear of chocolate? Oh, arrow. Good one. No. That'd be the fear of flight. You have some people who are scared of going on planes, but they'll go through it. But if you have a phobia of flights, you won't even step close to the airport or go anywhere near a plane because you'll do anything to avoid it. You'll even travel by foot as long as that means you're not going on a plane. Oh, I forgot what this one was. Acrophobia? Does someone know? Mohammed? Acrophobia? Huh? Fear of similar? No, not spiders. I forgot that one. You guys can Google it. Arachnophobia. That's the fear of spiders. Mysophobia. Guessing? Huh? No. Germs. So when people are germs, sometimes I think it's related to OCD because you end up having, or maybe not. I won't say anything. I'm going to get it wrong. But mysophobia is the fear of germs. So you see people, they're always wearing the gloves, they're always sanitizing, or they'll wash their hands constantly after touching something. Nomophobia. That's a new one, actually. I think it's a recent one. Does anyone want to guess? No? It's actually the fear of not having your phone. That's an actual phobia, of losing your phone. Nomophobia, that's a new one. It's an actual phobia now. A common one, I think maybe most of you will know or familiar, claustrophobia. Yeah, you're scared of being in confined places. So what happens when what if you have that? If you're there, the physical effects of fear happen, and you'll try to avoid being in a room. And then trypophobia. This one I think is a random one, but what is it? Not. No, I didn't put that one. That was a different one. Or was that the one? And this is why always take everything we say up here with a grain of salt. Trypophobia, I think, was the fear of shapes. I don't know if it was the one about being scared of pointy things, or maybe the shapes, like you were saying, like in a beehive, there's hexagons, like in a pattern. So that's a phobia. So like when shapes are in clusters. So there's a bunch of phobias. I'm not sure if I got those right. But at least you get the gist of what I mean with phobias. Where it might seem like something normal to other people, but it's so detrimental to them who have it. It stops them from being able to continue their daily activities or to enjoy even beehives, just an everyday thing. And so phobias, I think, are the extreme where fear holds you back. And the thing with fear, as I said earlier, it depends on how you look at it and what you see. If fear goes to that point where it stops you and you freeze, it holds you back and it brings you down. But fear can also be that motivation that pushes you forward and it helps you reach your potential, or it helps you get out of your comfort zone. And yeah, and instead of it being a stumbling block to you, it's a stepping block instead. So, fear. I guess here's two examples for you, for myself and fear. So, when I was in university, I only tell this story to a select few, but now I am telling you guys. I am comfortable with it now. And yes, you guys are special. So when I was in university, had to take chemistry 101, and I absolutely do not like math, and like I will avoid it. And I would try to study, but I just can't understand it because I just don't do well with math. So it came to the final exam period, and I knew I couldn't understand, I couldn't study, I would fail that exam, and I didn't know what to do. I just froze, and do you know what I did that day? I called a friend and I said, "You want to go to Niagara Falls?" And I did not go to the chemistry exam, and instead I went and took a day trip to Niagara Falls because I was scared of failing that exam. And if I was going to fail anyways, I might as well enjoy myself, was my thought. And that's wrong. No, don't like that. But that fear held me back because I ended up having to retake that chemistry 2 times. And there were 2 types of chemistry 1000 and 1001. And I took both of them twice. I took chemistry 4 times because I didn't like it. I was scared of failing, so I had to keep doing it because I wouldn't pass. And that fear held me back because I did not want to have anything to do with it. Another thing that I'm afraid of, and maybe this is something you guys know, I'm scared of spiders and creepy crawly, you know, the long, kind of like centipedes, but they have long silver legs. I'm scared of spiders. And this is the opposite of it. I'm scared of spiders, and there are these times when I was driving in the car and a big spider popped out of nowhere. And I'm driving on the highway and I see it crawling across the dashboard. And what do? I know I can't stop or panic or do an emergency because I'll get in an accident or someone else will. So I am keeping my eyes. I am alert for that spider. I am vigilant against it. I am preparing for the worst, hoping for the best, making a plan. If that spider pops out on the side, what am I going to do? I'll go to this side and just drive on one side of the steering wheel. And making my plans, if it pops out and I'm on the street, I'm going to go and stop on the side and ask someone to help me with it. That's how bad it was. Another time I was massaging and I looked where I am. It was summertime, so there's the fan and it's blowing. And I see a spider in the fan. And it's crawling. And I'm terrified because the fan is behind me when I realized it. What if that spider gets close to those blades and it gets chopped and then the spider bits go on me? I'm watching it carefully, vigilant. And I'm watching it crawl up and down, and then it goes along the wall, and then it goes to the ceiling, and I'm terrified. So wherever that spider is going, what do? I go the opposite way so that I'm watching it, and it can't sneak up on me. And it got to the point, and this was at the beginning of the massage, and the massage is for 1 hour. That was an hour of torment for me. So it came to the point when I asked the client to turn around. So he's face up, and he noticed me looking at the ceiling because I'm massaging like this. And then I saw him looking, and I'm like, oh no, now I'm making him think that there's something there. So I went back and massaged looking down, occasionally glancing up, and I lost that spider. And I was scared the rest of that massage too. But what was the difference between those two stories of me in the chemistry exam and that spider? The chemistry held me back, but the spider helped me, you can say helped me push me forward. Because I was scared of that spider, but what did I do? I continued on. I made plans. I became vigilant against it, watching it. So I was preparing for whatever could happen to me, which probably was nothing. And in that way is I guess a loose example of how fear, if you do use it properly, can help you. Instead of it being something to hold you back where you're scared and you hide in a corner, to be something where it makes you cautious, so that you're aware of the dangers that might happen. Because if you think of it, if you're scared of, if you're scared of, walking in the dark that someone might hurt you, what do? You start walking carefully. You become aware of the people around you, of any suspicious movements. If you're scared about your finances, what do? You end up budgeting. You end up trying to find ways that you can save a little bit more money, spend a little bit less. If you're worried about, if there's other things that you're worried about, what do? You start preparing yourself to face that consequence, that result. So fear doesn't always have to be a bad thing. And fear can give you that push to move forward by making you cautious. And it can also help lead you to finding an answer on how to deal with it. Or it can do the opposite and, like I said, make you freeze and not think properly. I did not think properly with that chemistry exam, and it can lead to despair. I ended up having to retake it all the time. And that's just me in everyday life. So what about your fear and your spiritual life, because that's also something that's a lot deeper than that. And what about with your relationship with God? One of the things for me, I think, growing up, thinking about my relationship with God, I think one of the biggest hurdles for me was the fear of not being good enough for God. Because of church, they always teach you God is loving and he's holy. But for me as a person, like, man, I'm so bad. I have all of these like bad thoughts or insecure thoughts. If I do something bad, will God still love me? Or what if the other biggest fear was being exposed to myself? The Bible is really strong and powerful. In some ways, it's also fearful because it cuts you straight to the heart, because it reveals us and our weaknesses and our faults, our flaws, things we don't want to come face to face with. Or things about our self-worth and value. Will God still love me? Will he hold me? Let me go? Those were things I had to overcome. And thank goodness, it's so important to be reading your Bible because there's so many assurances and promises that God has. And the thing about, for me and my, is will God still love me? The verses that I would always repeat to myself is that no power, no dominion, no, does anyone else know the rest of that verse? No power, no dominion, nothing in heaven and earth and sea, land can separate me from the love of God. And that's what held me on and helped me go through that fear, because not because of what I was facing, but because of who said it and who it was pointing to. And all those promises of being abandoned and alone. There's so many verses where God says he will not forsake you, that you are worthy, more worthy than the birds of the air and flowers of the fields. And like the songs we were singing, it's something that's just so encouraging. And that fear that I had is what brought me closer to my relationship to God, because I was seeking an answer and confirmation or reassurance of it. And so one story that I do want to share with you is about Peter and Jesus in the storm. It's found in 3 of the Gospels, in Matthew, John, and Mark. But Matthew is the only one that has this blurb or this section about Peter and Jesus walking on the sea. So the gist of it is that after preaching on the mountainside, Jesus sent his disciples ahead of him to set sail to Capernaum, which was on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, on the west side. So Jesus was dismissing the crowd, and he sent his disciples ahead of him by boat to go to the other side. And what Jesus did is he went to the mountainside to pray. And that was throughout the night. So that the boat ended up being in the middle of the lake. And the winds were really strong, and the winds blew, so the water was very rough and choppy, and the waves kept crashing into their boat. And just before dawn, Jesus went to them and walking on water. And by that time, they're in the middle of the lake, right? In the middle of the storm. And they were frightened. When Jesus approached them, he frightened them because they thought he was a ghost. And Jesus knew that, so he called out to them saying, "Do not be afraid, because it is I." And Peter answers, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come onto the water." And so Jesus tells him, "Come." So what does Peter do? He gets off the boat and he walks on water towards Jesus. But when he saw the waves, he was afraid and he began to sink. And then he cries out, Lord, save me. And Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, why did you doubt? And then they climbed into the boat with the others. The wind died, and they arrived on the other side at Gennesaret. So again, fear can be crippling, or it can give you the push. I think the thing about Peter is very, very interesting. Because, well, I guess you only need to look at the bolded words. Because what happens? Jesus approaches them and he frightens them. That means Peter was afraid when he saw Jesus. And Jesus reassures them about who he is, that it is him that's there in the middle of the storm. And when Peter asks him, he had some hope or confidence because he tells Jesus, if you tell me to come onto the water, I'll come. So he kind of, if you think about it, is like, I want to go, but I don't want to go. Is it really you? Give me that push. So what does Jesus do? He says, come. And that was enough for Peter to get over his fear and take that step of faith onto the water. And he got off the boat and walked on water, but seeing the wind, he became afraid. So when he took his eyes off Jesus and saw what was going around him, that situation, those storms, the choppy water, the waves, panic and fear came in, and that's when he sank. But he did not lose hope because he knew he was sinking, he's going in the water, but what does he do? He cries out to Jesus and says, Lord, save me. In spite of all of that that's going on, Peter knows he can reach out to Jesus and Jesus will go. And what does he do? Jesus reaches out his hand to him and he catches him. Yes, he might say, you of little faith, why did you doubt? But the thing was that Peter took that first step. And there's that verse somewhere in the gospel where a man asked Jesus to heal his son, and he goes, I believe you, but help my unbelief. And I think that's what a lot of us are like. We're like Peter, and we're like that man where we believe, but there's something that holds us back. So I think Peter, his fear was enabling him to move forward to Jesus. That fear wasn't something that was crippling him or stopping him. It gave him a push. So another example, I guess, would be fear. I've gone skydiving. I've gone treetop trekking. I went on those swings where you're lying face down, where you go on the swing and you're gliding, and it was over the edge of a mountain. I've gone jumping off cliffs. Yes, I had fear, but that didn't stop me because I wasn't afraid. What was bigger than that fear was I knew I would have that. It would be thrilling for me to see the views. Going from skydiving, that didn't stop me because I wanted to see the view of everything, the whole landscape, and same thing with the gliding over the mountaintop or going the treetop trekking. The experience that I would be having, it's a new one. And the rewards of the memories, a once-in-a-lifetime memory that I would have of doing these activities. Those were the things that drove me forward to go over that fear. And I think that's the same thing that drove Peter forward to go on the boat, because he knew at the end of it was Jesus, and that experience of being able to go to Jesus despite all of that, knowing that there was I guess in that way, a reward for him made him step forward, because that reward of being with Jesus was bigger than that fear of walking on choppy water. So, with that, if there's something that you fear, and there's something about it that's stopping you or making you hesitant about you knowing yourself with God, don't let that stop you from getting closer to Him and missing out on the blessings that He has for you, the transformations that He wants to make of you. Because, like Mitra was saying last week about through fear, there's the second chance and you get to experience God's love and compassion. Fear doesn't have to be something avoided. It can be something embraced and appreciated, especially when you're experiencing it properly and wisely, because that's a way for you to be able to draw out your potential and your relationship with God, and to take you to newer heights, because it's pushing you out of your comfort zone. So what are some things that can help with overcoming fear? What for me, with how I mentioned my fears when I was younger, it was reading the Bible, praying, it's talking with others, getting others to pray for me, memorizing verses, even if it's just one or two. And if that's the case, that fear where you end up leaning and becoming aware of God leads to freedom. Instead of it being a fear that Satan uses to hold you down and chain you down so that you end up being stuck in one place. So, kind of like how the birds, when they're the newborns, they just jump off and fly. That's kind of what we need to do as well, and just trust in our God, who is the reason why we're able to overcome everything and be able to face our fears. And so use fear as a stepping stone towards God. And so here are two verses that I thought would be good to leave for us to meditate on. Peace I live with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, and neither let them be afraid. For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not, I am the one who helps you. And thank goodness He is a personal and close God who does that for us, regardless of whatever our biggest fear is. And so, thank you. I hope instead of being scared and afraid, that you have encouragement this week to face whatever it is you're going through. Thanks.
Thank you, Eleanor, for that encouraging message. I definitely learned a lot and needed that.